In this video, I'll walk through my advanced color correction workflow. We'll cover isolating colors with secondary selections using the Final Cut built-in tools, as well as some new features introduced in the latest update of ColorFinale. I'm Raphael and welcome to the channel where our goal is to always fix it in camera and then finesse it in post. And I always appreciate the early thumbs up because we all want the colors in our videos to look fantastic. And if you haven't seen it already, I did a basics to color correcting and grading log footage. Make sure you check that out. It's a nice complement to this video. The link is in the description. Here's a little rundown of what we'll cover in this video. Secondary masking and selections using the HSL, hue, saturation, and luminance, to make sure that we're affecting only the colors we intend to, like skin tones or very specific colors. We'll adjust the hue versus saturation to ensure the blacks are black and the whites are whites, so we don't get any funky color tints in weird places. And finally, those little subtle changes that I use to finish off a color grade. Things that most people won't immediately notice, but your brain notices them on a subconscious level. These are the things that I do on my client work to bring it all together. So one of the first things that we want to do is make sure that we're using the latest Final Cut Pro. Anything 10.5.4 or higher would be great. So for this particular shot, it was shot in log. I have a whole video that is dedicated to the basics of color grading C-Log without any plugins, but I'm just going to do that really quickly right now, just walk through the steps. So I'm going to add in a color wheels. I'm going to bring down the shadows. Again, I want it to be close to 0 here for the shadows. I'm going to bring up the highlights, and I can tell this part right here is the skin tone. This is all the hat on top. And I'm just going to bring down the shadows again to make sure that it is kind of nicely balanced. Right now, I'm just going through this quickly. I'm adding in a little bit of contrast overall, just some separation. I'm going to add a crop, and I like choosing a piece of the skin just to make sure that we got the highlights right where we want them, between 40 and 70 RE. That's a good place to have it. But on the skin tone indicator, the skin tone is definitely leaning a little bit to the red, and sometimes it's a little bit further, and sometimes it leans to the yellow, depending on which lights you use and how your camera is set. I'm going to turn off the crop without adjusting it any further, and just turn off the crop right now and make sure that this is deselected. Otherwise, it's going to prevent us from doing the next step. So make sure that this isn't blue. So this is a base grade, and I have a whole another tutorial which talks about how to color correct log footage with no plugins. And in that one, I would just do a quick general skin tone color correction where I would adjust it. But the problem with that workflow is that if I adjust the skin tones in a broad stroke like this, I would adjust all the other tones and colors in the shot. But I just want to affect the skin tones. So this is where the advanced part comes in. I'm going to go back to the color in the inspector, and I'm going to add another color wheels. But I'm going to add in a mask. But I only want to select the skin tone. Make sure that the eyedropper is selected. And we're going to select the skin tone and try to get a good selection without getting into too many different colors. And I'm also going to push shift and then select the other side. You can view masks, and that's a pretty dirty mask. And you want to definitely tweak with the HSL to make sure that you're getting only the skin tones. You can always expand that out if you need to see a little bit more. And this is by pulling these little handles right here, it's going to soften it out. So the more refinements you do, the better it's going to work out for you. And if it's getting parts like this, that's okay, because it's falling within the same color, so we're going to be affecting it all. But you can always add another mask on top of this later to only isolate the skin tones or mask these out from the background. I'm going to turn off the mask, and so now we haven't actually done any adjustments to it. We just selected the color. Now we can just affect that color. We can go and wherever we want to go. So I'm going to just reset that. I'm going to go back and turn on my crop. Go back to the color wheels. And now I want to make sure that the skin tone falls on the skin tone indicator as close as possible. And because it was exposed right and it was shot with the right color temperature, it's a pretty simple fix. So I'm just going to turn off the crop. For this shot, it's not a huge change, but you can definitely see that the skin warms up and looks a little bit better. We're not affecting the background like we were with the basic color correction. So that's how you get the skin tones. And now what we can do is we can copy and then paste the color wheel, the second color wheel, right back onto that same piece of footage. We can open up that third color wheel, and then we can just invert the color selection. So we're selecting everything but the skin tone. So now I'm just going to reset this parameter, and now I can start adjusting everything outside of the skin tone, if you can see. So everything except for the skin tone is being selected. Just going to reset that. And now we can add in a little bit of teal into all aspects, into the highlights, into the shadows, into the mid-range. We can also darken the background overall. So I'm going to bring down the midtones, not too much. You can also bring up, but now we're just affecting everything except for the skin tone. So it doesn't matter if we want to add a moody look to it. We know that the skin tones are where they should be. We can also desaturate the background to make the skin tones pop a little bit more. But overall, that's where I would tweak until I find the look that I'm going for. So let's take a look at that together. That's the base grade right out of the camera. Fix the skin tones and then adjust the background and add a little bit of a hue and tint to everything except for the skin tone. So I know that the skin tones are exactly where they need to be. At this point, I would add a little bit of sharpen, 2.5%, looks good. I would add a vignette overall. So that's where we started, and this is where we got to. And then I would add in one more thing after everything else. That is a hue and saturation curves. And I would go to Luma Vs Sat, and I would make 2 points close to the edges. I would drag down the darks, and I would drag down the highlights. Make sure there's no color tints in the highlights, especially over here in the hat. And there's no color tints in the darkest parts of the shadows over here and over here. So I want to make sure that those are true desaturated colors, both here and there. Because without that, there's this little bit of a tint that happens. So we want to make sure that that is removed. It's one of those things that I like to add to make sure that there isn't a weird kind of cast of color on those specific parts of the image. I'm liking the skin tones, I'm liking the overall balance, and at that point I would say it's pretty much good to go. And another great use for that is to change specific hues to different colors. We're going to add some color wheels. I'm going to add a mask. I'm going to select all that red, push shift and select even more. You can use the HSL or you can use 3D, which is a simplified version of doing the exact same thing. It's a little bit more streamlined. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to keep adding until I have the colors, all the colors that I want. And push option, and I'm just going to add the softening up quite a bit. Click view masks, and now we can change that color. So this is really useful for scenes where the colors are really vibrant or too vibrant. where you can desaturate them just to tone them down, because in this kind of shot you want to make sure that it's his face that we're capturing, that we're focusing on, that the viewer is focusing on. But in other instances you can actually bump up that saturation, so we could tone it down just like that. You can make it brighter, you can make it darker. If there's something that is distracting in your shot, this is a great way to tone it down and bring it down. There's a great example of Zack Snyder doing that to all the gas cans in Army of the Dead.
Those red gas cans are too red, and so we had to go back and isolate all the gas cans and just take some chroma.
So now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it with ColorFinale. I just find it a lot simpler and everything is in one place instead of having to add all these different layers. And it's even easier to copy the masks now the way that they've designed it. So make sure you check for the latest update for ColorFinale. Make sure that you're on ColorFinale 2.4 or higher for all these features to be available to you. Just click check for updates to make sure that you are up to date. And you have to do this while Final Cut is closed. So add ColorFinale, drag it over. And one of my favorite features right off the bat, don't even have to do anything with log footage. You can just click assume log. It brings it to a neutral place right off the bat. But obviously this is not where we want to be, so we need to adjust this a little bit further. So I can definitely see that it's not bright enough and there's not enough contrast overall. So I can do that here, just add a little bit of contrast. But we're going to go into the layers, open up your edit layers palette, and then you can bring down the shadows. You can bring up the highlights just to where comfortable. And I know that this was already overexposed, but I'm looking at this here. This is the skin tone. And we're just bringing that up between 40 and 70 IRE. So I want that between here and here. So in terms of the contrast, it's a little bit better. But again, I want to affect the skin tone separately from the background. So I don't want to adjust anything here, because if I do that, it adjusts everything in the highlights or even in the midtones. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a group. We're going to add color wheels into that group. And within this group, I'm going to create a mask. And I create a group because then we can add in multiple layers, but it'll only happen underneath that one mask. So you don't need to create multiple masks to work with a specific thing. Click on the mask. I'm going to click on the image mask, which brings up the HSL mask. I'm going to click on the color picker. And I'm going to select the color. I'm going to click on the plus the add range. And click on it again. And just keep adding it until feel like we have most of the colors. You can just click down here. You can display the mask input and the mask. So you can see that we're getting the face, but not the eyes. So at this point, I don't want to try to go in here because we're starting to get into the darker shades. So what I'm going to do is now play with the HSL, and I'm going to try to expand that mask and just try to add in a little bit more. Yeah, it's starting to affect the rest of it. I'm going to add in a fall off. I'm going to add in a little bit more of a fall off. And I'm just going to add in a 1% blur. I can go to the color wheels. We're selecting just the skin tones, or anything that was the same as the skin tones. Anything that's within the skin tone range of the colors. So I'm going to turn on that crop we had from the beginning, and the skin tones are a little bit to the red still. So I'm just going to shift them over, and the brightness is where I would like them to be. So I can turn off the crop again. And again, just affecting the skin tones in that ever so slight way. So now I want to affect the background. So I would name this skin tones. And then I would create another group, and I would call this background. And then I would add another color wheels. Before I do anything, I would add in a mask. Go to this mask, right click on the HSL mask, click copy, go to the background mask, click on the mask, and then click paste, and then click inverted. So now this color wheel will only be affecting everything in the background, not the skin tones. So now we can add in a little bit of teal and drop the shadows down a little bit, even in the midtones. Add in a little bit of teal and even the highlights. And then we can just adjust ever so slightly, just the balance between the foreground and the background. And then overall, I would add in an HSL curves. Click on Sat versus Luma. Click on Lock Curves to Point. Click in the shadows and in the highlights, and then drag those parts down to make sure that we got rid of any color casts that are happening in the darkest part of the image and in the brightest part of the image. And then there's a new feature called filter, which you can add your sharpness right here overall, or you can tone it down or crank it up. But again, everything is about being subtle. So I would add in about 15% sharpness, because we have the mask for the skin tones. You can actually do the same thing and go into filter. In the skin tones, click on sharpness, and ColorFinale allows you to get a negative sharpness. So you can actually bring it down and give yourself some softened skin if that's what you want it to do. So I'm just going to turn on the box blur. You can see that it's only going to affect the skin. If you want to do any kind of skin softening, I would leave it with the sharpness. I wouldn't use the other ones. Since we're already here, you can add a filter effect. And because of the masks, you can actually create your own extra bokeh. Create it on both sides if that's what you want to do. So before and after. ColorFinale has trackable masks. You can actually create a mask that can follow a subject. This is a tool that is found in DaVinci Resolve. So just add in, for this one, let's add in a 60% feather. We're going to adjust the brightness of the face overall, say if you wanted to do that, or if you want to track the eyes. Just click on the mask, click on the ellipse, and then just let it track. This is why I really like ColorFinale, because of these kind of features that just put everything into one little tight package, and you can just turn it on, turn it off as you see fit. And I'm pretty sure that the tracking is part of the ColorFinale Pro package. So let's do another example where we're going to choose and change the color, or make this a little bit more saturated just to make it pop. So we're going to use ColorFinale. I'm going to put it on. We're going to open up the layers. Add some color wheels. We're going to add in a mask. Click on image mask for the HSL mask. We're going to set our primary color. We're going to add some more. The only thing that I don't like right now is that you have to keep clicking. It's not like in Final Cut where you are able to hold and click and just drag a larger selection. But it's still pretty good. This is a new feature, so I'm actually quite happy. Make sure that we're not choosing the hair color. Just gonna double check the composite. And I add in a 1% blur overall. And this is gonna be one of those cases where having that track matte is going to be very important. So, click on the result. I want to make sure that we're not affecting the head. So I'm just going to create a simple oval or ellipse over the head. and then I'm going to be able to track that. So I'm gonna let that go. And when it's done, I'm just gonna set the mode to subtract to make sure that it's not affecting anything else. Deselect the mask and click on the color wheels. And this is where you can actually start affecting the color. You can change the color. So we're just gonna bump up the saturation. So if you take a look before and after, let's make sure we get the midtones. Definitely more saturated. Add in a curves. I'm gonna add a new mask. Click on the mask. Going to copy and then paste it. Deselect the mask. And now we can start changing the color. So if you're ever in a situation where you need to change the color of an item in your shot, this is a great way to do that. Really make sure that the audience is focusing where you want them to focus. Where do you want your audience to look and what do you want them to see? It really is up to you. That is the simplified version of my advanced color grading. Definitely for the bigger projects, I send it out to the colorists. When I'm working on mood boards or concepts with clients, this is a great way to get exactly what you need. But the beauty of doing it all in Final Cut and with ColorFinale is that you can then save out your own LUTs and use them throughout your entire project without having to learn a whole nother system just to get these kind of grading tools. If you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And here's a playlist with more color correcting videos. Also, I live stream on my second channel where I do deep dives on the creative process as well as freelance financials. So make sure you check that out. As always, thanks for watching.